Dr. Melissa Wright stared at the message on her holographic display with her 4 eyes blinking in confusion. The prestigious Galactic Science Council had just sent her team what seemed like the strangest assignment in her 30 cycles of research. They wanted her to study how humans taught their young ones about science. The blue-skinned researcher leaned back in her gravity-adjusted chair, her antennae twitching as she read the message again. The council believed that humans, being from a high-gravity death world called Earth, must use extremely aggressive teaching methods. After all, how else could a species that evolved on such a dangerous planet educate their offspring? She called her team members into her office at the Galactic Research Center. Kevin Martinez and Amanda Bennett, both xenobiologists specializing in death world species, arrived quickly. Their species, like hers, came from a peaceful world with stable weather and gentle gravity. They had spent years studying humans from a safe distance, but now they would have to go to Earth themselves. The council wants us to participate as students in a human education center, Melissa explained, watching her colleagues' face scales change color in surprise. We need to understand how they teach their young ones about the universe without causing serious injuries. Amanda's tail curled nervously as she spoke up. But Dr. Wright, I've read reports about human children. They run around on hard surfaces, play with chemical compounds, and even touch wild organisms for fun. How can we safely observe such dangerous practices? Kevin nodded in agreement, his protective third eyelid fluttering rapidly. Their gravity alone is twice what we're used to. And their atmosphere, it contains corrosive oxygen. Despite his concerns, there was excitement in his voice. Like many researchers, he found humans fascinating, even if they were terrifying. Melissa brought up more details about their assignment on the display. They would be sent to a place called Ohio, to a building humans called a middle school. The council had arranged everything with the local authorities, who seemed oddly enthusiastic about hosting alien scientists. The humans have promised to provide us with gravity adjusters and atmospheric filters, Melissa assured her team. They say they regularly host visitors from low-gravity worlds. She paused, wondering if she should mention that most of those visitors were diplomats and traders, not scientists studying their education system. As they prepared for their mission, the team spent hours watching recordings of human classrooms. They were shocked to see young humans handling glass containers, mixing substances together, and even using heating devices. What really confused them was how calm the adult humans seemed about all of this. "Look at this," Kevin said during one of their preparation sessions. They let their children use sharp tools to cut things, and they call it arts and crafts. How many casualties do they have? To their surprise, the safety records they received showed very few accidents. Either humans were incredibly resistant to injury, which, being Deathworlders, they were, or their teaching methods weren't as dangerous as the council assumed. The team spent the next week getting their protective gear ready and studying human educational customs. They learned about things called homework, pop quizzes, and group projects. Each new discovery left them more puzzled than the last. The night before their departure, Melissa made one final entry in her research log. "Tomorrow we begin our study of human education methods. The council expects us to find a harsh, militaristic system designed to toughen their young for survival on their deadly world. But something about this assumption feels wrong. Perhaps there's more to human teaching than we imagine." End log. The alien research team stood outside the brick building called Roosevelt Middle School, their protective suits humming quietly as they adjusted to Earth's gravity. Dr. Melissa Wright checked her team's equipment one final time. The morning sun felt strange on their protective shields, much brighter than their homeworld's distant star. A human male walked toward them with what they recognized as a smile. Their cultural briefing had taught them this was a friendly gesture, not a threat display. He wore what humans called business casual, a blue shirt, tan pants, and a warm expression that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. "Welcome to Roosevelt. I'm Peter Richardson, the science teacher you'll be working with," he said, extending his hand. The team stared at it nervously before Kevin Martinez remembered their briefing about human handshakes. He carefully reached out and performed the greeting ritual, trying not to show his anxiety about touching a Deathworlder. "Thank you for having us," Melissa said through their translator. "We're very interested in your teaching methods." She watched as young humans streamed past them into the building, moving with what seemed like dangerous speed and energy. Peter led them inside, pointing out various features of the school. "This is our main hallway, and here's the cafeteria where students eat lunch." The aliens exchanged worried glances at the mention of communal eating, having read reports about human food containing dangerous levels of sodium and sugar. They reached the science classroom, and Amanda Bennett's sensors immediately began recording everything. The room had rows of black-top tables, colorful posters showing various scientific principles, and shelves filled with equipment that made the aliens nervous. Was that a Bunsen burner? They used open flame in teaching. "I thought we could start with my first period class," Peter said, gesturing to the seats in the back where they could observe. "They're doing a simple experiment today about density and buoyancy." Before they could respond, the room began filling with students. The young humans seemed barely to notice the alien observers as they took their seats, chatting and laughing. The aliens watched in fascination as Peter easily got their attention without using any obvious crowd control technology. "Today we're going to learn why things float or sink," Peter announced, holding up various objects. "Everyone will get to make predictions and test them out." The aliens watched in growing amazement as Peter distributed materials: water, salt, eggs, and various small objects. The students worked in pairs, following instructions and recording their observations. There were no safety restraints, no protective force fields, and yet somehow no one was getting hurt. When one student accidentally spilled some water, Peter simply handed her a paper towel and helped her clean it up. There was no decontamination protocol, no emergency procedures. The aliens' anxiety meters were going crazy, but the humans acted like this was perfectly normal. Linda Cooper, the student teacher, noticed their distress and approached their observation area. "Is everything okay?" she whispered. "You all look a bit tense." "They're handling liquids without protective gear," Kevin whispered back, his scales shifting to a worried purple color, "and making changes to water's molecular structure with sodium chloride." Linda tried very hard not to smile. "You mean the salt water experiment? It's completely safe, I promise. Would you like to try it yourselves?" The three aliens looked at each other in shock. Try the experiment. Actually handle the materials. But as they watched the students laughing and learning, something about the humans' calm confidence made them curious. Maybe, just maybe, they could learn to understand why these Deathworlders seemed so relaxed about what their own species considered dangerous science. After watching 3 class periods of basic experiments, the alien research team gathered in the empty science lab during lunch break. Their protective suits were running at full power, trying to calm their stress responses to what they had witnessed. Dr. Melissa Wright's antennae hadn't stopped twitching since she saw a student drop a test tube, and nobody even evacuated the room. "I've been analyzing their safety protocols," Amanda Bennett said, her tail wrapping nervously around her chair leg. "They have something called safety goggles and lab aprons, but these barriers seem absurdly thin for protection against chemical reactions." Kevin Martinez was still processing what he had seen in the last class. They let the young ones mix baking soda and vinegar without radiation shielding. The reaction produced bubbles, actual bubbles of gas, and everyone just stood there watching. Peter Richardson entered the room carrying something that made all 3 aliens freeze. It was a plate of small brown squares that he placed on the table. "I thought you might like to try some brownies my wife made. They're a traditional Earth snack." The research team stared at the offering in horror. Their scans showed the brownies contained multiple compounds their species considered dangerous: theobromine, sugar, and worst of all, traces of caffeine. Yet the human was suggesting they eat these things. Linda Cooper joined them, already biting into one of the deadly squares with obvious enjoyment. "They're really good," she said. "Mrs. Richardson adds extra chocolate chips." Melissa looked at her teammates, then back at their hosts. The humans seemed genuinely puzzled by their hesitation. Using her suit's advanced sampling system, she carefully took readings of the brownies' molecular structure. Everything in their training screamed that this was dangerous, yet humans consumed these regularly, even gave them to children. In the interest of scientific research, Melissa said slowly, "Perhaps we should attempt to understand this aspect of human culture." She adjusted her suit's filters and took the tiniest bite possible. The taste was unlike anything in her experience. Her species' usual food consisted of processed nutrition capsules, carefully screened for any strong flavors that might overwhelm their sensitive taste buds. This was an explosion of sensation. "This is what you feed to students?" Kevin asked in amazement, watching Melissa's scales shift to a pleased pink color. "No wonder they have so much energy." Peter laughed, a sound the aliens were starting to find less frightening. "Wait until you see our next experiment. We're making volcanoes with the 6th graders." All three aliens reached for their data pads at once. "Volcanoes." Amanda's voice rose several octaves. "You're going to simulate volcanic activity in a room full of children." Linda quickly explained that it was just another baking soda and vinegar reaction, this time with red food coloring. But the aliens had already pulled up their emergency protocols and were sending urgent messages to the Galactic Science Council. "Perhaps," Melissa suggested, trying to keep her voice steady, "we should observe this volcano activity from behind the safety of the classroom's transparent barriers." She meant the windows, but her translator was struggling with her panic. Peter and Linda exchanged glances, both fighting to keep straight faces. "Of course," Peter said kindly. "Whatever makes you comfortable. Though I should mention, next week is our unit on electrical circuits." The aliens' protective suits registered a synchronized spike in their anxiety levels. Teaching children about controlling lightning. What kind of fearless creatures were these humans? Linda Cooper watched with growing interest as the three alien scientists huddled in the corner of the classroom, their protective suits glowing softly in the afternoon light. The students were working on their volcano projects, and despite the aliens' fears, no one had been injured by the fierce reactions of vinegar meeting baking soda. "I think I'm starting to understand something," Linda said, approaching the research team. "You're not just afraid of our experiments. You're surprised by how we handle failure." Dr. Melissa Wright's antennae perked up at this observation. She had indeed noticed something odd about the humans' reaction to mistakes. When one student's volcano didn't erupt properly, Peter had simply encouraged him to try again with different amounts of materials. "On our worlds," Melissa explained, her translator humming softly, "we cannot afford to learn through trial and error. One mistake could be fatal. Yet here, you encourage your young ones to experiment." A student nearby dropped her pencil, and Kevin Martinez flinched at the sound. But the girl just picked it up and continued writing in her notebook, recording her observations about the failed volcano attempt. "That's exactly it," Linda said, pulling up a chair. "We believe making mistakes is a crucial part of learning. It's how humans have always learned. Try something, fail, learn why it failed, and try again." Amanda Bennett's tail uncurled slightly as she processed this information. "But how do you determine which failures are acceptable and which are too dangerous? Our data shows that human children frequently injure themselves in minor ways, yet you consider this normal." Peter joined their conversation, having finished helping a group of students clean up their workspace. "Think of it like building immunity," he suggested. "Small challenges make us stronger and better prepared for bigger ones." The aliens watched as the students began presenting their volcano projects. Some worked perfectly, creating impressive red eruptions. Others barely fizzed, and a few did nothing at all. Yet every student, successful or not, had to explain what they thought happened and why. "This is remarkable," Kevin said, his scales shifting to a thoughtful blue color. "They're not just learning about chemical reactions, they're learning how to analyze failure without fear." A student raised her hand and asked if she could try her volcano again tomorrow, having figured out what she did wrong. Peter smiled and agreed, making the aliens' anxiety meters spike again at the thought of repeating such a volatile experiment. "I need to update our research parameters," Melissa announced, typing rapidly on her datapad. "We've been focusing on the wrong aspects of human education. It's not about their resistance to dangerous conditions. It's about their relationship with failure." Linda nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. And wait until you see tomorrow's lesson. We're going to learn about gravity by dropping things from different heights." The aliens' protective suits whirred with increased activity at this news, deliberately dropping objects. In their cultures, accidentally dropping anything was considered a serious mistake that required immediate safety protocols. "Don't worry," Peter assured them, noticing their distress. "We'll start with soft things like feathers and cotton balls. Though I should mention that next week's lesson involves magnets." The three aliens looked at each other in shock. Manipulating magnetic fields in a classroom. Just when they thought they were beginning to understand human teaching methods, these Deathworlders revealed another layer of what their species would consider reckless experimentation. Yet somehow, watching the students' excited faces as they discussed tomorrow's gravity experiments, the alien researchers felt their fear slowly being replaced by something else: curiosity. The yellow transport vehicle that humans called a school bus came to a stop outside the Ohio Science Center. Dr. Melissa Wright and her team had triple-checked their protective suits before boarding this loud, bouncing vehicle filled with excited human children. Now they watched in amazement as the students filed out, chattering about the exhibits they wanted to see first. "Everyone stay with your assigned buddy," Peter Richardson called out as the students gathered around him. The alien researchers had learned that this buddy system was another human safety protocol, though it seemed terrifyingly simple compared to their own world's safety measures. Linda Cooper walked beside the alien team as they entered the building. "The kids love the dinosaur exhibit," she explained. "They get to touch real fossils." Touch real fossils. Amanda Bennett's tail stiffened in shock. "You let them handle ancient artifacts with their bare hands." They watched as a group of students gathered around a large fossil display. A museum guide showed them how to gently touch the petrified bone of a creature that had lived millions of years ago. The alien sensors detected no force fields, no protective barriers, just a simple sign that read, "Please touch gently." "This is how they learn about their planet's history," Kevin Martinez observed, his scales shifting to a fascinated green color through direct physical contact with the evidence. The next exhibit made their protective suits work even harder to maintain their calm. It was called the Physics Playground, and it featured various hands-on experiments about force, motion, and energy. Children were actually encouraged to push, pull, and spin things to see what would happen. "Look at this," Melissa said, watching a young human girl adjust weights on a pulley system. "She's learning about mechanical advantage through experimentation. No simulations, no safety protocols, just pure physical interaction with the principles." They moved to an area where students could build and test simple machines. One boy had created a rather unstable-looking ramp for marbles, and instead of stopping him, the teachers watched with interest to see if his design would work. "Aren't you concerned about failure?" Amanda asked Linda, watching the marble roll off the ramp and onto the floor. Linda smiled as the boy rushed to retrieve his marble, already talking about how he could improve his design. "That's the beauty of it. Here, failure isn't scary. It's just another step in learning." The alien team observed as students explored other exhibits. They created miniature tornadoes in water tubes, generated static electricity with their own bodies, and even used microscopes to examine living organisms. Each activity would have required multiple safety permits and protective equipment on their homeworlds. "I need to document this," Melissa said, her antennae twitching with excitement. The humans have created a space where their young can safely experiment with dangerous concepts. They're not just teaching science, they're teaching curiosity itself. Peter joined them, looking pleased at their growing understanding. "Wait until you see the chemistry demonstration later. They're going to make elephant toothpaste." The aliens quickly searched their databases for information about this elephant toothpaste. When they realized it involved rapid decomposition of hydrogen peroxide, they almost called for an emergency evacuation. But something stopped them. Perhaps it was the confident smile on Peter's face, or the eager looks of the students gathering for the show. "We'll observe," Melissa decided, though she did take 3 steps backward. From a safe distance. After all, they were starting to learn that on Earth, safe had a very different meaning than they were used to. Back at their temporary research base, the alien team struggled to write their report for the Galactic Science Council. Dr. Melissa Wright stared at her datapad, trying to find the right words to explain what they had discovered about human education methods. How could she make the council understand that what looked like chaos was actually a carefully designed learning system? "Listen to this part," Amanda Bennett said, her tail swishing as she read from her notes. Human safety protocols in educational settings appear dangerously basic at first glance. However, closer observation reveals a sophisticated system that teaches risk assessment through controlled exposure to mild dangers. Kevin Martinez looked up from his own report section. "But how do we explain the concept of safety goggles to the council? They're going to think these thin pieces of plastic are completely inadequate protection against chemical splashes." The team had spread their collected data across multiple holographic displays. Videos of students conducting experiments floated in the air around them. One showed a class learning about air pressure by crushing aluminum cans with nothing but hot water and cold water. The aliens still couldn't believe no one had been injured. "I think I understand now," Melissa said slowly, her antennae moving thoughtfully. "We've been looking at this all wrong. The humans aren't being reckless. They're building natural defenses through gradual exposure to their environment." Linda Cooper had stopped by to help them understand some final points about human education. She watched as the aliens tried to translate their experiences into terms their superiors would understand. "What about this?" Amanda suggested, pulling up another file. "Human children learn through a process they call trial and error. While this would be fatally dangerous on our worlds, Earth's relatively stable environment allows for safe experimentation. A failed chemistry experiment might create unpleasant smells or stains, but rarely causes serious harm." Kevin added his own observations to the report. Their teaching methods seemed to mirror their planet's evolutionary pressures. Just as humans developed physical adaptations to survive Earth's harsh conditions, their education system develops mental adaptations through controlled challenges. The team worked late into the night, trying to capture everything they had learned. They included detailed notes about the classroom's emergency shower, fire extinguisher, and first aid kit, safety measures that seemed primitive but had apparently served human schools well for many years. "Should we mention the brownies?" Kevin asked, remembering the shocking moment when they discovered humans regularly consumed stimulant-containing foods during educational activities. "Perhaps we should focus on their theoretical teaching methods instead," Melissa decided, still not quite ready to explain human snack customs to the council. Linda read over their draft report, helping them clarify points that might confuse other alien species. "You know," she said, "most of us never think about how remarkable it is that we can learn this way. It's just normal for us." Melissa nodded, adding one final note to their conclusion. "Human education succeeds not despite their planet's dangers, but because of them." Their teaching methods embrace the controlled chaos of their world, turning potential hazards into valuable learning tools. The aliens sent their report to the council, knowing it would cause quite a stir. After all, they were suggesting that the supposedly primitive safety measures in human schools were actually part of a sophisticated system for developing resilient, adaptable learners. They just hoped the council would understand, and that no one would ask too many questions about the elephant toothpaste demonstration. 1 month after submitting their report, Dr. Melissa Wright and her team stood before the Galactic Science Council. The Grand Chamber was filled with representatives from hundreds of worlds, all eager to hear about their findings on human educational methods. The team's protective suits hummed quietly, adjusting to the formal chamber's artificial atmosphere. Your report has caused quite a discussion, the council leader said, their bioluminescent patches glowing with interest. You claim that human teaching methods are not dangerous, but rather ingeniously adapted to their environment. Melissa stepped forward, her antennae steady with newfound confidence. Yes, council leader. We discovered that humans use what they call hands-on learning to gradually build their young ones' resistance to environmental challenges. The chamber erupted in confused whispers. Kevin Martinez activated a holographic display showing students conducting their volcano experiments. Several council members flinched at the sight of the red foam erupting from the small models. As you can see, Kevin explained, they create controlled versions of dangerous phenomena. This allows students to understand natural forces without facing real danger. Amanda Bennett added her own observations. Their safety measures, which we initially thought inadequate, are actually carefully calculated. They protect against serious harm while allowing enough exposure to build natural resilience. A council member from a crystalline world raised an appendage in question. But what about their strange practice of allowing failure? Our educational systems focus on perfect execution to prevent accidents. That's the most fascinating part, Melissa replied. Humans use failure as a teaching tool. When an experiment doesn't work, students must figure out why. This develops their problem-solving abilities and builds confidence in facing challenges. The team showed more recordings from their time on Earth. The council watched in amazement as students handled real fossils, built simple machines, and explored chemical reactions. Some members seemed horrified, others intrigued. Based on these findings, the council leader said, "We are considering establishing the first galactic human educational exchange program. Would you recommend this?" Melissa looked at her teammates, remembering their own journey from fear to understanding. "Yes," she said firmly, "but with some suggestions. Visitors should start with basic experiments, perhaps the baking soda volcanoes, but not the elephant toothpaste demonstration just yet." This brought confused murmurs from the council, who had no idea what elephant toothpaste was. Melissa quickly moved on before anyone could ask for details. Most importantly, she continued, "We believe human educational methods could help our species become more adaptable. Their approach teaches more than just facts. It builds confidence, creativity, and resilience." The council voted to approve the exchange program. Soon, alien students would experience human teaching methods, while human educators would help other worlds develop safe versions of hands-on learning. As the team left the chamber, Linda Cooper was waiting for them. She had been invited to help coordinate the exchange program, ready to help set up the first interspecies science fair. She asked with a smile. The aliens' protective suits registered only a small spike in their anxiety levels, a major improvement from their first days on Earth. Melissa's scales shifted to a confident shade of blue as she nodded. "Yes," she said, "but perhaps we should start with something simple, like the crushing cans experiment, or maybe—" She paused dramatically, mixing colors with food dye. Linda laughed, already imagining how other alien species would react to these dangerous human experiments. The universe was about to learn that sometimes the best way to handle a Deathworld's challenges was to face them head-on, with safety goggles, of course.